things happen for a reason is like letting a disease in. It's rhyme and reason 490.
There's a rhyme and reason for your life. There's a rhyme and reason.
Hey there, Tony here. And I know the world's not treating you right today, but I know you got what it takes, and you can stand up to it anyway. And because, things happen for a reason, right? Oh, things happen for a reason, huh? Well, why? Seriously, if things happen for a reason, why is that? Why in the world would that always be true? And I ask because I hear that or I read that sort of nonsense all the time. But why do I say it's nonsense? I mean, if things happen for a reason, why do I oppose that idea? What's the reason? I mean, come on. There must be a reason why I would say it's nonsense. So what's the reason? And if you can provide a reason, are you sure you're not just saying something you had to say? Because you'd have to say something pre-planned in order for everything to have a reason. Otherwise, there's no way to know what's a reason and what's just a made-up opinion. It's all starting to sound pretty ridiculous, right? You know why? That's because it is ridiculous. Because sometimes things happen, and the only reason was it was an accident. Something that didn't have to happen. And something that could have been totally avoided with just a little more time or attention to details or different choices. I can remember a time back in my carpenter days back in Houston, Texas, and this was way back in the 70s. I remember a time working in this small area, and I had what they call the 16-ounce trim carpenter hammer in my hand, and I took a good swing at this, what they call 16-penny nail, and I didn't keep my eye on the target, and I smashed the dickens out of my finger, my left index finger. Now, I could have avoided that if I'd have just paid attention. That was not predetermined by God in ages past, from infinity past. He didn't determine that that was going to happen to me. And if he did, what? Because, you know what? Later on, after that, it was quite some time after my finger healed, I did it again to the same finger. And then later on after that, I cut that finger to the bone right by the knuckle and had to deal with that. And that same finger, when I was a kid, my dad had this 54 Chevrolet Bel Air. These were big cars, big heavy cars. And he was getting out to get some gas, and I was going to get out with him, and then he suddenly closed the door and shut it on that same finger. So, that finger on my hands probably feels like the redheaded stepchild, as they say, of my fingers. Why do you hate me so much, Tony? Okay, I said all that because every one of those was an accident. There was no reason for it other than it was an accident. But still, a lot of people insist there's a reason for everything. And they say silly things like, it's all part of God's plan. Really? Because that's not how God says it is, right in his word. And I'm sorry if that offends you, but when it comes to, your truth or God's truth, I'm going with God every time. I mean, I'm a good example of that. And I've just gone through 2.5 years of a battle with something not functioning properly in my body. And doctors didn't determine what it was until just the past few months. And fortunately, it appears that the correct root problem has been figured out, and it appears so far that a surgery has gotten me on the road to recovery. I hope that you're detecting, if you're keeping up with these episodes, you're detecting that my voice is getting clear again. It seems to me that it is. It still sounds very nasal because I still have what they call packing materials up inside there that hold the bones when they've been moved. These packing materials have to hold the bones in place while they heal so that the opening can stay open that they opened. Anyway, just figured I'd explain that, and there you have it. But all of that got me on the road to recovery. But, what about the people who say things like, God was working something out as he took you through this? Or maybe they say, God knew you could handle this because he doesn't give us any more than we can handle. And they even say, God needed to get your attention, teach you a lesson. Oh my goodness, really? I mean, on the surface, those might seem like harmless pieces of advice, but you know what? They're actually despicable. Because that's not how God is working out things. In fact, you know what? He doesn't want anybody to die. That's a link in the show notes. He doesn't want anybody to die. How do I know that? Because he says he wishes and he wills it would be his will that none should perish, much less be sick. But guess what? We all die. And basically everybody gets sick at least a few times in life. But there is a reason for death and sickness, and that reason isn't God micromanaging billions of lives. I can't imagine why anybody would want God to be doing that, and I can't imagine God wanting to do that. And he doesn't want to do that. That's why he gave us brains. Hello? The reason all of this happens, these kind of things happen, death and sickness, is sin. And how it separates us from God, and how he designed us perfectly, but we sin. Our human perfection was traded for a couple of bites of forbidden fruit. That's about 6,000 or 7,000 years ago. And don't say that you wouldn't have done it too, because you probably would have. You've done much worse than that, I'm sure. And ever since that 6,000 or 7,000 years ago, our genetics have deteriorated so much so that we no longer live hundreds of years like they used to. In fact, not many people even live to be 100 years old. But knowing you have a very short time limit here on Earth should motivate you to find out if truth exists. It does, by the way. And discover if there's even absolute truth you can depend on. And there is, by the way. Or you could choose to take your chances, if that's even possible, since things happen for a reason, and you can just, see what happens when you die. I don't recommend you try that strategy, but if you do, I'm sure you have a good reason. Life is full of chance and circumstance. We don't know all the steps to this dance, but I can say for sure that I prefer the cure offered by the Savior in advance. That's it for this episode of Rhyme and Reason. Please don't hesitate to tune in next time when you'll hear me say, "This is Tony from TonyFunderburk.com. Remember, life has rhyme and reason because God made you."
There's a